Chapter 3 Shiny Star. In the airport, I saw Willie, who with childish excitement embraced me, but with him was his new wife, Rita, who immediately conveyed a streak of negativity and faint expressions, but I tried to not pay attention to it. Also, Sophia, Rita's daughter, with her fiancé Gil, came, and their presence made me feel welcome. Through careful analysis of Rita's behavior towards my arrival, I understood that the arrangement was not permanent and not for completely pure philanthropic reasons. Somehow our conversation segued to the mention of Sophia's brother, Murat, who had disappeared for 4 years. Upon the mention of his name, Rita's face grimaced into a deep sense of disappointment, and she slightly insinuated that I was to be the replacement to ease her heartache. It became very apparent that her agreement to take me in was conditional in a sort of escape from her sense of loss of her son, in which I had to fill her emotional void by playing the part of being her child. I foresaw that would be a conflict of interest because I was loyal to my own mother, despite the fact that I was still not in synchrony with her deceitful craftiness regarding me. I came 2 weeks before the end of the 7th grade school year, and Rita believed that I should start school even though there were a few weeks left just to start acclimating. My English was not fully developed to its potential, especially my conversational. I had a thick Israeli accent, but the 10 months of schooling that I had made it somewhat a workable instrument. A day before going to school, Rita and I went to the swimming pool that was next to the condominiums where we lived. There was a girl there by herself who was about my age, mysteriously swimming on her own. I saw it as a great opportunity to intertwine a friendship, remembering how I promised myself on the airplane to recreate those friendships that I nostalgically missed in Israel. But the girl played hard to get. I playfully approached her and asked her if she would be willing to race, but her discomfort of my daring approachability was apparent. I didn't give up. Something about her told me that she would make a great friend. She had blonde, long hair with a glimmering pair of green eyes. Her appearance was angelic and friendly, but her shyness up against my daring persistence appeared strangely exotic and maybe somewhat unsavory to her. I finally decided to try to impress her, and I made a dexterous backflip that helped me crack up her timidity towards me as she gave me a compliment, at which moment the ice between us was broken. She told me that her name was Hannah, and I told her in brevity my story and origins. "Why do you move so much?" she asked. I fumbled in my head for proper explanations or even expressions that would not scare her away, that would depict some kind of truth but not the bull's-eye truth. The facial expressions were filled with speechlessness and hidden tears, because my gypsy lifestyle caused me a sense of void of foundation and unprocessed befuddlement. The real answer was ingrained into words, family problems, but I didn't want to mention it at the start of the fruition of our friendship. When I started going to school called Washington Middle School, which was a public school, people were intrigued by my foreign origins and queer mannerisms. What I found interesting was that each student had their own schedule in the home class. During the Pledge of Allegiance, I was completely lost about the scenery of putting your hand on your chest and listening to high-pitched voice announcements. It kind of felt like discovering a new world. School became fascinating to me and a challenge that I was determined to overtake, to which I was performing at the most diligence. On top of it all, during the PE class on the first day, I saw Hannah, and this time, all of her timorousness that I witnessed with me completely faded. Moreover, she seemed like the leader of the squad. I tried to compete with her extrovert personality in animation, but it was not an easy task, because my English was still lacking. After school, I saw Hannah opening the garbage door 2 houses down from me, and I found out that she lived close to me. It was so pleasantly surprised. In the 2 weeks of school, I proved the teachers that I could keep up with the class material without taking English as a second language, which would have kept me behind. And upon Rita's strong insistence, I was never exposed to it. Also, I met with 2 new friends that lived in our complex through that time, Elizabeth and Jerica, who were in my grade. Over the summer break, the friendship of the four of us, myself, Hannah, Elizabeth, and Jerica, significantly strengthened, and I had major opportunities to practice my conversational skills in English. Particularly speaking, my friendship with Hannah and her mom, Patty, found no bounds. Patty had a short, bouncy, and curly haircut. Her spirit is very young and caring, and she is very maternal. Although she is very humble, she has an amazing way of gleaning all sorts of wisdom about life. When I visited Hannah on a regular basis, I noticed now how Hannah's household felt so peaceful and thriving, a great haven to escape from my family problems. At times I wondered why Hannah's household was so full of magical harmony, while my house was full of nothing but strife. Also, during the summer break, in the room where I lived, I found a picture of a handsome young man whom I thought to be Murat as I curiously looked at him. He had deep brown eyes, a sharp square jaw, and a deeply pondering gaze. I never asked Rita about him because it was very apparent that the topic distressed her. Once I started school, I became very famous and popular. Some students talked behind my back, but I was not bothered by anybody's opinion of me. Also, teachers were astonished by my dedication to school and what I had to offer with my dynamic and vivacious character. The English class with Miss Hernandez was particularly intriguing. We had an assignment to write a significant autobiographical incident, which was my immigration to the United States, and by the help of Hannah's editing of my rough draft and condensing the 9-page rough draft with Rita, I wrote an exciting account for which I received a superlative grade. In November, Willie and his 70th birthday had his 70th birthday, and there was a jubilee, which I took pride in attending, where I wore a majestically looking red dress connected with many of the family members, and I had the opportunity to display my graceful dancing moves. In December, I was intrigued for the first time to Christmas. I was introduced for the first time to Christmas by Hannah and Patty. Through my interaction with them, I was surprised to find out that even though they were Christians, they believed in the Torah, which was the Old Testament. Completely taken aback by that discovery, I exclaimed, "You believe what I believe." Time to time, Hannah would come over and we had discussions about Jesus. I would tell her with conviction that Jesus was not the Messiah, and Hannah would counter it with no less conviction that he was. Unfortunately, though, Hannah was uncomfortable at the sight of Rita because Rita didn't shy away from always displaying a disapproving sense of dominance. One day, Rita didn't like how Hannah was leaving the house in a rush when she came, seemingly to avoid an encounter with her. So Rita decided to confront Hannah about her unappeased frame of mind, dragging Willie and me by her side as she intrusively knocked at Hannah's door. I was so ashamed when Patty and Hannah opened their doorsteps, all flustered, and listened to Rita's complaints about Hannah. Rita also disapproved the idea of me reading books that Hannah gave me. She attested that there were plenty of books that I could read in their household. Eventually, because of my supreme dedication to scholastic matters, which sacrificed the time that I could have spent with the family, Rita complained that she didn't quite feel that I treated her enough like a mother, which was hard for me because my mother was writing me concerning letters from Ukraine, saying stuff like she wanted to jump onto the train tracks and that Jack was my biological father, in hopes that Jack's mother would leave me an inheritance. This stuff drove me to hysterics, but the longer I stayed in Rita's household, the more tensions grew between her and me, while my relationship with Willie grew closer and I felt his paternal warmth streaking out of him. The lucky thing about Mom being in Ukraine was that she was able to get me my birth certificate because the original was lost. The problem in the structure of the composition of the family, however, was that Willie never had a say in anything. He always did what Rita told him to do, to think or to feel as if he was secretly not officially her slave. I feel that it wasn't quite right of Rita to expect me to treat her like a mother. I felt that the more she enforced that expectation on me, the more it failed, although I did develop a very benign relationship with Sophia and Gil. They were always there for me as mentors and seemed to care about me. Meanwhile, I developed a close relationship with my math teacher, Miss Oseguera. One time we had a parent-teacher conference, and Rita seemed to be feeling unhappy with the fact that in all of the classes I took, I managed to process straight A's. Apparently, it seemed like she was jealous of the notion that I might have been smarter than her. In the parent-teacher conference, she wanted to test my skills and demanded that I answer a math problem in front of Miss Oseguera. I was so ashamed by her pressing vindictiveness that I couldn't think. Miss Oseguera wanted to help as she saw that I was under pressure, and Rita snapped at her, "Let Alina answer the question." While talking to my English teacher, Miss Hernandez, Rita complained to her that I put too much diligence in my schoolwork and that I would develop ulcers if I continued that way. At the same time, a flock of Rita's hair was protruding out of her head, and she looked ludicrous. I felt so much shamefulness in front of my teachers to a measure that was unspeakable. Before taking me in, Rita told me to put emphasis on my education, and I did, but that it didn't satisfy her. To be quite frank, no matter what I did, it was impossible to satisfy her. Around February, we were learning how to write directions in English, and Miss Hernandez specifically said to write directions for a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Very awkwardly, I had no clue as to what that was. While everybody started to work, I confusedly looked around and motioned to one of my classmates who was sitting close to me. "Psst, Tyler, what is a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?" Tyler looked at me with wide eyes of apparent surprise and exclaimed to the entire class, "Alina doesn't know what a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is." Alina doesn't know what a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is. For which comment the entire class roared into laughter. Mr. Hernandez was amused and asked me to write directions for our turkey sandwich. Quite honestly, I didn't ask for so much attention, but I did enjoy it. Around the end of the class period, the entire class wanted me to follow the directions in demonstration of following someone's ability to write directions, for which I earned many giggles, as all the ingredients were already in front of me. Interestingly, in that February of 2005, Marat reappeared to the family because Rita sent an email to him saying that Marat's grandfather was dying, to whom he decided to owe a visit. Marat and I immediately found a common language, and my precociousness leaped into far-fetched understandings and intertwinement of feelings. I found out that he also had been cast out in the family, that he also had particular problems with his own mother, similar to the problems I had had with her, and that he was greatly suffering from loneliness. Unlike me, he is extremely introverted and somewhat antisocial. It is very hard to dig into his skin, but I somehow managed to do just that. I suggested that we keep in touch, call each other, and he readily agreed, but at the same time I asked that he not tell his mother. Although Marat reluctantly restarted his relationship with his mother, I knew that it was not as deep and meaningful as the relationship I developed with him. And knowing his mother, I knew that she would be against the idea of the relationship between Marat and me due to an intrinsic sense of jealousy. She always liked to sabotage her control, and because I was a minor, there wasn't any way of dodging it except by keeping vulnerable matters confidential from her. One thing to note is that Marat and I are not related by blood. Marat is Sophia's older brother, and Willie is not his biological father. Marat's father had committed suicide when Marat was about 11 years old. The father hanged himself in 1989, to be specific, before their immigration to the U.S., and Marat's immigration was likewise very unpleasantly toilsome, along with major family dysfunctions. Because Rita was under the impression that Sophia followed her consultations about the way she should live her life, Sophia was considered the successful child that reached her own potential. But because Marat rebelled against his mother's control, Marat was considered a failure. Rita was always upset if I had different opinion or perspective about life, or if I didn't quite follow through with her advice. She really felt like she was congeniality, and competitions with her wisdoms were greatly unwelcome. As the time came closer to graduation, Rita came to the conclusion that she no longer wanted me to live in her household, a decision she arrived on her own, but she wasn't completely sure of it. Willie, however, doted and loved me, but unfortunately couldn't stand up to her. She invited my grandma, and my grandma had a chance to attend my graduation. Truthfully speaking, I felt a lot more support coming from Patty and Hannah, and Patty took me to a Christian concert where they sang worship music. felt a strange streak of warmth permeating from the words of worship, which took my mind away from worrying about Rita kicking me out. But at the same time, I didn't quite understand Jesus' role in my life at that time. A couple of weeks before graduation, we had a picnic with the entire class, which was a great escape from negative thoughts. I honestly didn't want to leave anywhere because I had created meaningful friendships. In that picnic, we made a human pyramid. I was in the center base, and that arrangement reflected the life pressure that I seemed to go through as I had to hold the entire pyramid. Also, we had a prom where we celebrated the ending of an eventful year. One time during school hours at lunch, the principal approached me and asked, "How long have you been in the country, Alina?" "About 2 years," I answered with humility. "Your accomplishments are very compelling." The principal answered. "Thank you," I reciprocated while feeling a sense of confidence from his acknowledgement of my insane endeavors. When graduation came, my relationship with Rita was at its peak in terms of tension, and she did not want to attend my graduation. Although Willie was reluctant to follow her lead like a dog on the leash, he was obliged. Grandma came over, and the plan was that after graduation she would take me with her. At that time, she already had her own apartment in a senior house in New York. I talked to Patty about the matter, and Hannah and Patty offered that I should stay with them. I was in Hannah's room, and Hannah excitedly talked about how we would share the space, and I would be a part of her family, like her very own sister. "It's a dream, Hannah," I wistfully told her and hinted on its unreality. "It's not a dream, Alina. It very much can happen," Hannah insisted. According to my predictions, Grandma did not allow it. In one of my conversations with Patty, she told me the most enlightening wisdoms of life. "Alina, don't worry. God has an amazing plan for you, and whatever happens, wherever you go, remember that it is His perfect plan for your success." How strangely familiar, yet very distant that notion appeared to me, I thought. During graduation, as we were presenting ourselves to our seats one by one from the stage, I was next to the principal waiting for the person in front of me to go, and the principal caught a moment to tell me, "I'm proud of you, Alina." I didn't think any of that, although he said it in a way that made me feel his paternal streak. I did not study for the recognition, but for the foregoing knowledge that I would have to rely on my wits, and education was my savior from family doom. Once we were all seated at the very end of the ceremony, the mayor of the city of Le Havre presented an award from the Boys and Girls Club, and he began talking about an immigrant girl whose story was very parallel to mine. Then he exclaimed, "This award goes to Smiley Face." I thought I was hearing it wrong, so I didn't quite instinctively get up, but everybody around me looked at me and nudged me. "Alina, that is you. Go." And all of a sudden, I shook myself from my own daydreaming and realized that it was actually my name that they were calling. I had to go down the stairs towards the stage, and it was unbelievable how in front of my entire class, in front of all the parents, I was singularly handpicked to have that award. After so much effort, I had my moment to shine, and my confidence uplifted into knowing that strangers believed in me. My heart was thumping, not in anxiety, but in excitement, while I was afraid to trip and fall down. The award was not simple. It had a wooden frame, a metallic lamination, and embossment that distinctly said the following: Hope of America Award presented to Smiley Face, who has demonstrated exceptional leadership, moral character, ethical conduct, and outstanding academic achievement, June 17, 2005. Who would have thought that one can do so? That in 2 years I would rise to such a level of recognition after so many frustrations and both-sized tears, which is slightly exaggerated after feeling so insignificantly worthless, constantly demeaned by my family members, and after relentless pursuit of something that would define me, I would be granted such an honor in famous California, United States of America, when I had been simply living in a small settlement in Israel, only to be distinguished from masses of whom the odds were running against me due to the fact that I had to put considerable more effort to compete with their advantage of being native speakers. After receiving that award, I did prove myself that I could be a shiny star, not for the purposes of recognition, but for the purposes of using my talents, my commitment, and studiousness in arenas that would be used to better humanity. The more familiar pressure I was undergoing, the more I drank from the cup of perseverance. It is not how many times you fall, rather it is about how many times you pick yourself up from destitute circumstances, using your struggle to better one's own character. In the sea of negativity, drowned in the waves of unfortunate predicaments, you would come out a champion. I stood on the stage, shook the mayor's hand, and saw everybody's awe-stricken expressions. The mayor gave a 5-minute speech about me, at which moment I realized that I had a compelling story to tell. I have a story of inspiration. I have a story that other people might use as something to hope for and lean on. Overlooking the audience, Patty's words about God flashed back in my head, and I was no longer worried about my destiny or about the uncertainty of life. I knew that Patty's words were tangible, that I was not alone in my struggles. At the end of the ceremony, I took pictures with my teachers, and Miss O'Segura gave me a book that she bought especially for me, called Little Woman, which I guessed was a reflective book of me, of how the four sisters started from humble beginnings, were united in spirit, and each underwent their own challenges. After the graduation, I came to Rita surrendered to anything that she decided regarding me, whether she wanted to get rid of me or not, whether we had tensions or disagreements, whether she had unrealistic expectations towards me or not, whether I resented the fact that she did not attend my graduation. It all did not matter to me. I was so sincerely thankful to her that she gave me the chance to prove myself, to find my internal treasure, to see my own potential. I hugged her and cried, "Rita, thank you for everything." Then and there, she changed her mind about sending me away. I was not expecting her to do that. She came to that decision on her own accord, and my grandma left back to New York without me. Although I did not foresee that coming, I was greatly relieved.